Today we're going to be taking a look at how we can link a data store to a custom view. And that's the way we can actually load a lot of information specifically in JSON format so we can create a view that can hold all this information easily and show it inside our application. The way we're going to do that is actually by taking first a look at the actual root view where everything goes and all the component pieces that make that up. So let's start over here inside our actual data view. It's the root view we're working with. And so the first thing you'll notice is just a standard view. We have a data member right here that uses the @observedObject property wrapper. The @observedObject property wrapper is how you reference an observable object variable that you want to use inside your code because you want to keep up with Swift's idea of a single source of truth. And so that the observed object property wrapper is how we reference that inside our code. Now it's just a standard var because we're going to be able to change that value because we're going to be manipulating this data as we go through this. And I give it the really creative name of stored buckets because it's storing bucket list items, which we'll take a look at here in a second. I do the explicit data typing right here so it is of type BucketDataStore, so that's the type of data we're working with. And then I initialize it by calling the BucketDataStore initializer. It has a single parameter named buckets, and from that I pass it the results of loadJSON. My loadJSON method is a helper method that can convert a JSON file and put it into an appropriate list of type. And then because it uses the any type as its default root value, I have to downcast that as for the appropriate type of bucket list items. And remember, in Swift, an array and a list are basically the same thing, so I'll use that term interchangeably. If it's confusing, I apologize, but it's basically the same thing because it uses the idea of it's a dynamically sizable structure that holds references in it, so it's like a list or an array, same basic thing. So we have that observed object right here, and because that's now a reference right here of that data, that single source of truth, I can go ahead and put that inside my ForEach, and so I go to ForEach stored buckets.buckets, referencing that data member right there, and I can create a bucket list row view for each of the items that are inside that. So I can have that so I can get this cool little information right here. So let's go take a detailed look at how those pieces work together to actually get to this point and then go from there. So we'll start off over here in the bucket list item. It's the actual data type that makes this up. It's what we're working with to actually store inside here. Now I'm using an identifiable data type, which makes it really easy to do work. If you don't have it identifiable, there's a couple more steps you have to take to do a really good job with it, but we'll take a look at that in some other videos, but it's no real big deal. So about my bucket list item, it's codable because it's coming from JSON data, so it makes it really easy. I can see it just got 3 data types right there. It's loading inside there as well as the UUID, so making sure we can have that. And then we're going to go ahead and go to our BucketDataStore. So the BucketDataStore.Swift is the actual component we use to hold that information. And the standard import of foundation because it has Swift in it. And then because we're working with data, we also have the import of combine. The combine import allows us access to the data library specifically for things like observable object and the @published property wrapper. And so because it's an observable object, we have to make a class. So this is a little bit different than normally we work with inside Swift where we make structs all the time. But because it's an object and something we want to have single instance of, we don't want copies of our data.